November of 2021, a woman named Patricia from Milwaukee, Wisconsin logged into her retirement account and smiled for the first time in months. The $42,000 she had quietly moved into a cryptocurrency exchange back in the spring had grown to nearly $180,000. She thought about her daughter's student loans. She thought about the mortgage on her small two-bedroom house that she had been paying off for 19 years. She thought about what it would feel like to finally breathe without the weight of financial anxiety pressing down on her chest every single morning. Patricia was 61 years old. She had worked as a hospital receptionist for over 3 decades. She had never invested in anything more complicated than a savings bond from her local credit union. But her nephew, a 26-year-old software developer in Austin, had been calling her every Sunday for months telling her about this new world of digital money. He told her it was the future. He told her the old financial system was broken and that regular people finally had a chance to build real wealth. He told her that the platform he was using was run by one of the smartest people on the planet, and that her money would be safer there than in any bank. Patricia trusted her nephew more than almost anyone in the world. If he said this was safe, then it had to be safe, so she moved her money, and for a while it looked like the best decision she had ever made. What Patricia did not know, what millions of people around the world did not know, was that the platform holding her life savings was built on a foundation that was already beginning to crack, and when it finally broke apart, it would not crumble slowly. It would collapse all at once, in a matter of hours, taking with it over $8 billion in ordinary people's money and leaving behind nothing but empty accounts, shattered trust, and questions that would take years to answer. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to the man at the center of it all. His name was Theodore Matheson, but people in the industry simply called him Theo. Theo grew up in a comfortable suburb outside of Washington, D.C. His parents were both academics, well-respected and well-connected. He graduated near the top of his class at one of the most elite universities in the country, where he studied physics and mathematics before eventually pivoting to finance. People who knew him in college described him as awkward but magnetic. He did not dress well. He rarely made eye contact. He played video games late into the night and often showed up to class in wrinkled t-shirts and shorts. But when he spoke about numbers, about systems, about patterns in markets, people listened. There was something about the way he explained complicated things that made you feel like he could see around corners that everyone else did not even know existed. After graduating, Theo took a job at one of the most prestigious trading firms on Wall Street. And within months, he noticed something that would change the direction of his life forever. He realized that the price of Bitcoin was being traded at different prices in different countries. In the United States, Bitcoin might be trading at $10,000, but in certain Asian markets, the same Bitcoin was trading for $10,400. That 4% difference might not sound like much, but if you had the infrastructure to buy Bitcoin in one place and sell it instantly in another, you could pocket that difference thousands of times a day without taking any real risk at all. Within a few months of discovering this gap, Theo left his Wall Street job and started his own trading firm with a small group of friends from college. They called it Ridgeline Capital. It was a handful of 20-somethings working out of a rented apartment, sleeping on air mattresses, writing computer code on laptops balanced on plastic folding tables. But what they were doing was making an astonishing amount of money. At its peak, Ridgeline Capital was reportedly earning between $30 and $50 million per day in profit. Not per month, not per quarter, per day. That kind of money changes a person, and it certainly changed the people around Theo. Suddenly, the awkward physics graduate who could not be bothered to iron a shirt was being invited to speak at the most prestigious financial conferences in the world. Journalists were requesting interviews. Venture capitalists were lining up to give him money. And politicians, the very people tasked with regulating the financial industry, were accepting his donations and posing for photographs with him at fundraising dinners. Theo was generous with his money. He donated millions to pandemic preparedness research. He gave to charities working on global health. He spoke publicly about a personal philosophy rooted in the idea that the purpose of making money was to give it away to causes that could do the most good for the most people. This gave Theo something that money alone could not buy. It gave him a moral story. He was not just a trader getting rich off of cryptocurrency volatility. He was a young visionary who was using the tools of capitalism to save the world. That story was intoxicating, and it worked on almost everyone who heard it. By 2019, Theo was ready for the next step. He wanted to build a platform where everyday people could come to buy, sell, trade, and store their cryptocurrency. He wanted to create the trusted institution of the crypto world, and so he launched a cryptocurrency exchange that he called Meridian. The name was chosen carefully. A meridian is a fixed reference point on a map, something you use to find your position. The message was clear. In a chaotic and confusing crypto landscape, Meridian would be the reliable landmark, the place you could trust, and it looked the part. The platform was sleek, well-designed, and surprisingly easy to use. It offered dozens of different cryptocurrencies. It offered lending products that let users earn interest at rates as high as 10% per year, far more than any bank savings account. And most importantly, it had Theo's face and reputation attached to it. Here was a young man who had been profiled in the most respected financial newspapers, who had testified before Congress, who had sat across from senators and calmly explained the future of finance. If Theo was behind Meridian, then Meridian must be legitimate. That was the logic. And for millions of people, including Patricia from Milwaukee, that logic was more than enough. Between 2020 and 2021, Meridian grew at a pace that stunned even the most optimistic observers. The platform attracted over 1 million users in its first full year. By early 2022, that number had climbed to over 5 million. The company raised billions of dollars from some of the most respected venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. Its valuation reached $32 billion. Theo personally was estimated to be worth over $26 billion, making him one of the wealthiest people under the age of 30 in the entire world. He was everywhere. He appeared on podcasts hosted by former presidents. He was invited to speak at the World Economic Forum. He testified before Congress, sitting at a polished wooden table with a microphone in front of him, calmly explaining why cryptocurrency was the future. Senators who had spent decades regulating banks nodded along as this 29-year-old in a t-shirt told them how the world was going to work from now on. He was convincing because he was calm. He was convincing because he used simple language. And he was convincing because people wanted to believe that what he was saying was true. But while Meridian was growing and Theo was giving speeches and accepting awards, something was happening inside the company that almost no one on the outside could see. To understand it, you need to understand a rule so basic to finance that it is taught in the first week of every introductory accounting class. The rule is this: you do not use your customers' money for your own purposes. When you deposit money at a bank, the bank does not take your money and use it to buy a vacation home for its CEO. When you put money into a brokerage account, the brokerage does not lend your money to its sister company to make risky bets. There are walls, legal and structural, that separate customer funds from company funds. Those walls exist because without them, the entire system collapses the moment something goes wrong. At Meridian, those walls did not exist. What was actually happening, according to evidence that would later emerge in court documents, was that customer funds deposited on the Meridian platform were being quietly transferred to Ridgeline Capital, Theo's private trading firm. Ridgeline was using those funds to make enormous, highly risky bets on various cryptocurrency tokens. And as long as the market was going up, and as long as new users kept depositing money, the math still worked. This is the oldest trick in the book of financial fraud, and it has a name. It is called a Ponzi scheme. The cracks at Meridian began appearing in the spring of 2022. The cryptocurrency market, which had been on an almost uninterrupted upward trajectory for 2 years, started to decline. Bitcoin dropped from nearly $69,000 to $40,000, then $30,000, then $20,000. Other cryptocurrencies fell even harder. When prices fall, people get nervous. When people get nervous, they want their money back. In a healthy exchange, this is not a problem. Customer funds are sitting right where they should be, ready to be returned at any time. But at Meridian, the customer funds were not sitting in segregated accounts. They were tied up in Ridgeline's trading positions, many of which were now deep underwater. Theo knew this, his inner circle knew this, and they made a decision that would later be described by federal prosecutors as a deliberate and sustained effort to deceive. They kept the platform running. They kept accepting deposits. They kept posting optimistic messages on social media. In June of 2022, as the market continued to slide, Theo publicly told his followers that Meridian was fine and that assets were fine. He said this knowing the company had a hole in its balance sheet of several $billion. Patricia from Milwaukee watched all of this with a knot in her stomach. She had seen her account drop from its peak of $180,000 back down to around $95,000. She called her nephew and asked if she should take her money out. He told her to stay calm. He told her that Theo had just said everything was fine. He told her that the people who panic and sell are the ones who lose, so she stayed, she waited, and she hoped. The collapse of Meridian did not begin with a dramatic announcement. It began with a spreadsheet. In early November 2022, a financial news outlet published an article that included details from an internal Ridgeline Capital balance sheet leaked by someone inside the company. The details were alarming. They showed that a huge portion of Ridgeline's assets were held in a cryptocurrency token that Meridian itself had created. The problem was both simple and devastating. That token's value was almost entirely dependent on Meridian's own health. It was like a house using its own walls as its foundation. The moment one piece moved, everything would come down. The article hit the internet on a Sunday afternoon, and within hours the reaction was immediate. Then the next morning, the CEO of one of the largest competing cryptocurrency exchanges in the world made a public announcement. He said his company held a large amount of Meridian's token, and in light of the revelations, they had decided to sell all of it. He framed it as a prudent risk management decision. but the effect was the equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded theater. Within hours, users of the Meridian platform, millions of them, started trying to withdraw their money, all at once. In banking, this is called a run. It is the most dangerous thing that can happen to any financial institution. On November 6, 2022, Meridian processed over $6 billion in withdrawal requests in a single 24-hour period. Meridian could not handle it. They did not have the money. On November 8, just 2 days later, Meridian suspended all withdrawals. The message on the platform was clinical. Due to current market conditions, withdrawals have been temporarily paused. That word, temporarily, would haunt millions of people in the weeks and months to come. Patricia found out at work. She was sitting at her desk at the hospital when her nephew sent her a text message that simply said, "Check your Meridian account right now." She opened the app on her phone and saw a message she did not understand. Withdrawals paused. She tried to move her funds. The butt was grayed out. She sat in the hospital bathroom on her lunch break and cried in a way she had not cried since her husband passed away 4 years earlier. Everything she had saved. Everything she had moved out of her credit union. All of it trapped behind a grayed-out button on an app on her phone. In the days that followed, the full scale of the disaster began to emerge. Theo attempted a last-minute rescue by reaching out to the very competitor whose announcement had triggered the run. For a brief moment there was hope, but that hope lasted less than 24 hours, after the competitor's team spent a single day looking at Meridian's books. They walked away from the deal. Their statement was short and devastating. The issues, they said, were beyond their ability to help. That sentence told the world everything it needed to know. On November 11, 2022, Meridian filed for bankruptcy. It was one of the largest financial collapses in American history. In the weeks that followed, investigative journalists and federal prosecutors began piecing together what had actually been happening inside the company. Court filings revealed that Ridgeline had been receiving customer funds from Meridian through internal transfers that were deliberately hidden from auditors. The money was used for a breathtaking range of purposes that had nothing to do with prudent financial management. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent purchasing luxury real estate in the Bahamas. One penthouse apartment, purchased for over $30 million, was listed in the name of Theo's parents. Millions more were spent on private flights, catered events, and personal loans to senior employees that were never repaid. But the real damage was not done by the real estate or the private jets. The real damage was done by the trading. Ridgeline, using billions of dollars in customer money it had no right to touch, made enormous concentrated bets on volatile tokens. When the market turned, the losses were catastrophic. The money that Patricia had deposited to help pay off her house, the money that a retired schoolteacher in New Jersey had been saving for a hip replacement, the money that a young couple in Georgia had set aside for a down payment on their first home, all of it was being funneled into a high-risk trading operation run by a group of people in their 20s living in a luxury compound in the Caribbean. The criminal investigation moved quickly. In December 2022, just 1 month after the bankruptcy filing, Theo was arrested in the Bahamas at the request of the United States government. He was charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit campaign finance violations. The campaign finance charges added another disturbing layer. Prosecutors alleged that Theo had used customer funds to make over $40 million in political donations to candidates in both major American political parties. These were not donations made out of genuine conviction. They were made to buy influence, to ensure the cryptocurrency industry remained lightly regulated. The trial began in the fall of 2023. Prosecutors presented internal chat messages in which Theo and his closest associates discussed the movement of customer funds in terms that made clear they knew exactly what they were doing. Theo himself took the stand. He expressed regret. He acknowledged mistakes. He said he had let people down, but the jury did not believe him. After less than 5 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all 7 counts. The sentencing hearing took place in March 2024. Before the judge announced the sentence, several victims were given the opportunity to address the court. Patricia from Milwaukee was one of them. She stood at the podium in a courtroom packed with reporters. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was steady. She told the judge she was 62 years old and would likely have to work until she was 70 to recover from what had happened to her. She told him she could no longer sleep through the night. And then she said something that silenced the courtroom. She said, "I did not lose my money in a market crash. A market crash is something that happens to everyone equally. What happened to me was a theft. Someone reached into my life and took something that I spent 30 years building, and they used it to buy themselves a penthouse." The judge sentenced Theo to 25 years in federal prison. It was one of the longest sentences ever handed down for financial fraud in American history. Patricia eventually got some of her money back. Not all of it, not even most of it. 2 years after the collapse, she received a check from the bankruptcy estate for just under $19,000, roughly 22% of what she had originally deposited. She used it to pay off a medical bill that had been sent to collections, and to cover 2 months of mortgage payments she had fallen behind on. The rest of her losses, over $23,000, was simply gone. She never discussed cryptocurrency again. In her living room on the shelf next to photographs of her late husband, There's a small ceramic dish where Patricia keeps her car keys and loose change. Taped to the inside of the cabinet door directly above that shelf is a small piece of paper on which she has written a single sentence in her own handwriting. The sentence reads, "If it sounds too good to be true, it is." She reads it every morning. It is the most expensive lesson she has ever learned. And that is the thing about stories like this. They end, but the damage does not. The court case is over. The sentence has been handed down. The headlines have moved on. But in Milwaukee and Portland and Newark and Atlanta and 1,000 other cities and towns across this country, there are people who are still living with the consequences of decisions they made based on trust that was deliberately manufactured and systematically betrayed. They are not statistics. They are not cautionary tales. They are your neighbors, your coworkers, your family members. They are people who did what they thought was right, who listened to someone they thought was smarter than them, who believed in a future that sounded almost too wonderful to be real. And in the end, that was the problem. It was too wonderful to be real. The biggest cryptocurrency collapse in history was not caused by a market crash. It was not caused by bad luck. It was caused by one person who decided that other people's money was his to use, and by a system that was so dazzled by his intelligence and his confidence that it forgot to ask the most basic question of all. Where is the money? If anyone had asked that question early enough, and if anyone had demanded a real answer, this story might have ended differently. But nobody asked, and over 1 million people paid the price. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone in your own life who might be walking down a similar path, please do 3 things for me right now. First, hit that like button. It helps this video reach more people who need to hear this story before they make a decision they cannot undo. Second, share this video with someone you love. A child, a grandchild, a friend, a neighbor. You might be the one person who saves them from becoming the next Patricia. And third, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the true stories that the mainstream news does not tell you the whole truth about. In the comments below, I want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know been affected by a scam like this? Your story matters, and it could be the warning that helps another person in this community avoid the same fate. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and I will see you in the next one.